Some quick background. House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan, along with House Oversight Chair James Comer and Administration Chair Brian Steele, have decided to launch investigations into Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's indictment of Donald Trump. And they argue that Congress should be involved in what is decidedly a state issue, wherein Donald Trump was charged for violating New York state laws related to campaign finance and falsifying business records. And so Jordan issued a subpoena to Mark Pomerantz, a former county special assistant district attorney, to appear behind closed doors for a deposition on April 20th. The DA has urged Pomerantz not to cooperate and has issued a response of his own to Jim Jordan and other Republican committee chairs. The House GOP continues to attempt to undermine an active investigation in an ongoing New York criminal case with an unprecedented campaign of harassment and intimidation. Repeated efforts to weaken state and local law enforcement actions are an abuse of power and will not deter us from our duty to uphold the law. These elected officials would better serve their constituents and the country and fulfill their oath of office by doing their jobs in Congress and not intruding on the sovereignty of the state of New York by interfering in an ongoing criminal matter in the state court. In other words, a wholesale rejection from the Manhattan DA's office when it comes to any participation in this kangaroo court by Republicans. And he didn't parse words in the slightest. Now, so as not to bury the lead here, Jim Jordan may be screwing himself by interfering in this investigation. Here's my segment with former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, where we discuss exactly this issue on The Legal Breakdown, available only on YouTube. Knowing that Jim Jordan is trying to use the federal government to interfere with a state prosecution, is he getting himself into any legal jeopardy here, any legal trouble here?
Brian, he is, and the district attorney in New York has told him so. And when you say he's interfering in a state court prosecution, that's not just your assessment, that's not just my assessment. That is precisely what the prosecutors in New York have told Jim Jordan. Let me just quote three things that they said to Jim Jordan in response to his ongoing attempt to interfere in a state court prosecution of Donald Trump. They said, one, you are, quote, interfering in an ongoing criminal matter in state court. Number two, you are engaged in an unprecedented campaign of harassment and intimidation. And number three, we urge you to stop your, quote, unlawful political interference. You know, them's fighting words. When a prosecutor tells you that is what you are doing, you know, Brian, that violates New York state law. Let me read from it really briefly. It is the New York state law is called obstructing governmental administration. And it says that when a person prevents or attempts to prevent a public servant from performing official functions by means of intimidation, physical force, or interference, you have violated that New York state law. Make no mistake about it. This is Alvin Bragg telling Jim Jordan, look, sport, you violated New York state law. Really, the only open question is what does Alvin Bragg do with that now?
In other words, Jim Jordan continues to run this circus at his own legal peril. Now, beyond Jordan's own culpability, a few issues here. First of all, the claim at the heart of this Republican obstruction effort is that Trump can't be held accountable by state officials because he's a leading candidate for federal office, a claim so patently absurd that I'm not sure how they could say it with a straight face. Republicans are basically saying that Trump has carte blanche to commit any crime he wants, and if any district attorney in any jurisdiction that skews Democratic tries to hold him accountable, then it can be chalked up to nothing more than political activism by the left. These Republicans are basically looking to shield Trump from any state crime by always just whining that he can't be subjected to the state laws because he's a candidate for federal office. Make sense? Didn't think so. Next, preventing the states from holding someone accountable for state crimes, which Jim Jordan and James Comer and Brian Steele are trying to do, is a violation of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. You cannot interfere with a state that is prosecuting a state crime. And yes, that still applies even if the prosecution is of your deity, Donald Trump. Which is not to say that Congress can't provide oversight, because it can, but it provides oversight of the federal government, not whatever district attorneys they don't like. And the fact that the self-described party of the Constitution doesn't know that really does put on full display the difference between Republican branding and Republican reality. And of course these Republicans will fall back on the talking point that what Donald Trump did in the Stormy Daniels case was a violation of federal law. And there was a violation of federal law. In fact, just as a quick aside, this is a good reminder that federal prosecutors brought a case against Michael Cohen in which Cohen admitted that his actions were at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald Trump. And Cohen went to prison for those crimes, which raises the question, why would the henchman go to prison for a crime that was at the direction of and for the benefit of his boss, and yet that boss not be held accountable? And the answer, of course, is that Bill Barr was running cover for his boss, Donald Trump. Jeffrey Berman, the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney at SDNY, conceded that it was because there was political interference from other Trump appointees who ordered prosecutors to end their investigation. Berman also admitted that Barr not only interfered in the case, he tried to kill the ongoing investigation and even suggested that Cohen's conviction should be reversed. So when Republicans pretend that Trump was absolved of any and all culpability because the federal government case went nowhere, they are feeding you a narrative that is so misleading it is almost offensive. But going back to the point, the Republicans will say this is a violation of federal law and so Alvin Bragg has no jurisdiction. Two things. First, yes, it was a violation of federal law, but New York also has laws. I know this is going to come as a surprise to some people, but New York State does have campaign finance laws and tax laws and business laws. In fact, you could be prosecuted for the same exact crime if it violates state law and federal law in both of those jurisdictions. But second, and more importantly, these Republicans had already started these investigations in Congress before they even knew what the crimes were. If you needed any more proof that this has absolutely nothing to do with the merits and everything to do with the GOP's desperation to shield Trump, it's the fact that they didn't even wait to find out what the charges were before wailing that the charges were unfair. Talk about giving the game away. You gotta love the irony too, in Jim Jordan issuing subpoenas and then getting butthurt when they get rejected, considering Jordan himself ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena from the January 6th committee. So the next time you hear Jim Jordan wail about the sanctity of a congressional subpoena, maybe remind him of his own position when he had the chance to comply with one. Per usual, it's rules for thee, not for me. And finally, here's my favorite part. While these Republicans and the federal government are busy violating the U.S. Constitution by interfering in the state's sovereign prosecution for state crimes, I like to occasionally remind myself that prior to taking office, Republicans vowed to take on rising inflation and high gas prices. That was all we heard for months and months and months. And yet the minute Republicans actually take power, what do? Abuse their committee positions to try and bully a local district attorney out of pursuing justice because they want to protect their deity. Funny how they never mentioned breathlessly carrying water for Trump as their sole intention ahead of midterms, huh? It's almost like they knew that predicating their entire identities on Donald Trump, yet again, wouldn't exactly be to their benefit. The fact is that if we're looking for an abuse of power here, we found it. But it's not New York, it is in Congress. It's with a group of Republicans who've decided that their God should not be subjected to any laws because he's Donald Trump. And so these people will issue subpoenas like the ones that they themselves have refused to comply with, despite the fact that they have no basis thus far for trying to shield Trump. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I wish I could do anything as well as the Republican Party can project. Before you go, a quick announcement. I've started a Spanish YouTube channel. Democrats desperately need to be able to appeal to Spanish-speaking audiences, so this is me doing my part. To help that channel get going in the algorithm so that we can finally start spreading our progressive message and breaking the conservative stranglehold on Spanish-speaking media, please subscribe and watch a few videos. The link to that channel, called Brian Tyler Cohen Espanol, is right here on this screen. And of course, to see more of my content in English, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. The link is also right here on this screen. Thanks so much for watching.